Hey everybody, welcome back. I hope everyone is well. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up, subscribe, share, like, comment, help this channel out as much as you can. It's appreciated. Today we will be doing part three of the lesson, a call to faithful living. Today's lesson specifically, I'm going to call on our sleeve, and uh, t- in this, I'll be covering Genesis chapters 6 and 7. So at this time, I would encourage you, if you haven't already, go ahead, pause the video, and run through those two chapters just to kind of get yourself familiar with it. And as I won't be hitting everything 100%, so that'll get it all fresh in your mind. Now, I mentioned before in a couple of my other videos how I believe Genesis chapter 3, verse 21, how it reveals the character of God as not only just, but kind as well. And moving through chapters 6 and 7, it appears that mankind was ignorant to this fact. That is to say, that it seems like they might have took his kindness for granted, and with that, sin begins to multiply. It's exponentially. It's just just taking off. We kind of wish our bank would do the same thing. Just grow without end. And this was essentially a case of monkey see, monkey do, sinners enabling sinners. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, it reads, "And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." And this happens to be the first mention of heart in the Bible. And here it is linking man's sinful desire with God's grief, and also as the source for mankind's actions. And that is to say that the individuals, mankind at this time, they were fulfilling the desires of uh, their heart's desire. Now, imagine you're dating a new person, you're making an expensive purchase, you're trying to buy a car, buy a house, whatever the case may be. A lot of times, you might get somebody that tells you, "Hey, take a step back, sleep on it," things along those lines. And what we're doing here, we ask ourselves, are you thinking with your heart or are you thinking with your brain? Um, and that is kind of brings us into the title of today's lesson, and that is wearing your heart on your sleeve. And this idiom, it essentially means to openly show your affection or opinions. In the case of wearing your heart on your sleeve, it's people can tell that you're romantically inclined to another, or that you're infatuated, or that you have intentions or whatever with another individual. And the question here that I would ask is, are we as individuals and as the church as a whole, and you yourself, are we as open with our opinions about God and about our faith as we are with the superficial? Um, when you're infatuated with another individual, like they say, it's very easy for somebody to be like, oh, you're attracted to them or whatever. Can people see you and go, oh, there's something about you that speaks to God, or are you excited to talk about him? You know, or are you talking about superficial things, whatever those may be? And for the individuals in chapter 6 and 7, they were thinking only with their heart. And not only that, but they were redefining the definition of marriage. Marriage, this was something that was designed as a gift. This is something that God created for Adam. He saw that he was lonely. He felt for him. He wanted to create a helper, someone that would be there to be beside him, work with him. This was something that was given to him. And here it had become superficial. Um, Consider Christmas. A lot of times we're told it's the thought that counts. It's not the money you spend, or um, it's the thought that counts. And uh, even we don't pick our own gifts. It's something that somebody else gets for us. Here, Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, it reads that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them, wives of all which they chose. So the word fair, they're saying that they saw the daughters of men, the sons of God, being a specific race or specific nationality, or we'll kind of get into that here in a bit. But and then they saw that these daughters of men, another group, they thought, hey, these people are fair, and we're gonna go be with them. They chose to be with these individuals based on their looks, and so here they were picking partners based on their sight rather than their character, rather than the character. That is, rather than their faith. And in my previous videos, I've laid the case for the word verbiage, the sons of men, to mean people of Christ. This is my personal view on this, and others they will argue that these are to be interpreted as fallen angels or Satan's follower, or other they were cast out, or demons, stuff like that. But either way, the meaning and the point here is the same. Mixed marriages were occurring, and through that, the idea of whether this was um, whether angels were having children with humans or the holy line of Seth was marrying the disobedient line of Cain, that argument becomes a minor point. And the major point here being the corruption of marriage is what stands out, and um, the result is the same. Now, Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, it reads in part, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Now, that is to say, the children were like their parents. These were, like I said, it says, um, the same became mighty men, which were men of old, men of renown. That is, so we're saying is that the children here were like their parents, and with that being said, that they were chasing their heart's desires. They were following along in their footsteps in that sinful lifestyle. Nothing was changing, and in the text it says it's in the text it's after this that God reveals his displeasure. It's the first verse here is they were multiplying, and it wasn't until after this that that verbiage is there that God's upset. And this touches a point that was brought up in my previous video um, by David Nelson when he was stressing the importance of educating the next generation. And through that education, you're able to raise your children with the proper morals and teachings to live the way that God intended. Now, Proverbs chapter 29, verse 16, it says, when the wicked are multiplied, transgression increases. What that's saying is that the more wicked individuals there are, the easier it is to transgress, the easier it is to sin, the easier it is to follow along with the pack. So like I said earlier, monkey see, monkey do, sinners enabling sinners. So at some point, someone's got to be the one to raise their hand, call foul, and say, hey, something's going on here. Otherwise, the wicked will multiply, the wicked will create more, and that process will continue to happen. So if you feel like the world is becoming darker or worse or more sinful as time goes along, then we as the Christian body, we need to sit back and we need to look at ourselves and realize, why is that happening? And here in Proverbs chapter 29, verse 16, that would put the onus on us. Now, coming full circle back to verse 6 here, like we said earlier, the children, these marriages, they were having children. These children are being raised in a sinful home, in a sinful nature, and this was displeasing to God, and that follows up in verse 8, and we have God's decision. Here, it's laid pretty simple. God sees a problem, and from that, he takes action. The question now, if we see a problem, what action do we take? A simple example of this is if you see trash on a sidewalk, you're supposed to pick it up. Do you always do that? Do you pay attention to that? If you're not paying attention to that, why not? Here in our spiritual home, our spiritual body, and our spiritual faith, if you see other individuals doing something, first, do you even see that? Secondly, if you do see it, do you speak up? And if you do or don't, hey, that's your walk, and that's something that you can consider on your own. Now, At this point, I want to consider again the men of renown. In chapter 6, verse 4, uh, look back and consider who were these individuals. Um, we don't know that. It doesn't say. Now, flash forward and consider Noah. How was he rewarded through this? And renown literally equates to fame. I don't know if people are necessarily chasing fame and all that stuff, but we all know Noah. We know his name, and this is recorded. Noah, this real man of renown that lived a life of purpose and substance, he was used by God to get rid of these other quote unquote men of renown who were nothing worth writing about. And now I look at Genesis chapter 6, verse 11. And here it says, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. Now, here, the words here before God. And this is discussing how one presents themselves before God. So consider the ark, and before approaching the ark, the high priest, when they're going through, they would bathe, they would put on clean clothes, and they had a whole ritual they would go through. Um, how are these Christians, how are these individuals, mankind, how are they presenting themselves before God? So it's not like Adam, it's not like God just banished them from the garden and didn't speak to them. No, this reveals that he was still present. Again, after they were banished, he gave them the furs. They still had that walk. He came down and saw Cain. So God was still involved, and here it speaks of um, them presenting themselves in a unholy or a blasphemous way. This is only a few generations removed from the garden, so they knew God. They had first, second hand accounts of God, of the garden, of these things. But society, humankind as a whole, they were annoyed. They were obviously they had to work, they had to toil, all these things now, and the women and the birth pains. And so yeah, they were annoyed, and I guess they chose to spite him essentially. Even with being only a first or second hand generation away from that close relationship, um, they still chose violence. That's what that verse said. Um, like I said, they had a fresh account of the peace and tranquility that was in the garden prior to that, the apple and everything. They knew what life could be like, but here we had the world, and it says that it was full of violence. And it's interesting how people today they'll say that if why the miracle stop? If I'd see a miracle, I'd believe in God. Um, my question for them is, would that really change anything? These people here in Genesis, they provide an example that it speaks of the desires of a heart and the sincerity of such, and how these individuals, even with that knowledge, the desire of the heart was stronger than the knowledge of the brain. So, as spoken of in chapter 6, verse 5 and 6, this story here, it's a foreshadowing of our life. That is to say that if we're corrupt before God, we will be condemned. We will meet condemnation. We'll be sent to hell. And here, Noah, he had a sincere heart for God, and he lived. And this too, this is an example for the gift of salvation that's available through Christ. Even if we didn't have the gospel and all these other things, uh, here in Genesis, the very first book of the Bible, and the first couple chapters, we have an example for what that would look like. Now, if you look at Genesis chapter 7, verses 11 through 24, this is where we're given the account of the actual flood. And we can't help but think of, again, it tells you, sometimes people think maybe that the water just came and it was instantaneous, but it talks about being days of rain and how quickly the waters rose. And you have to imagine that there were sinners, there was houses on the side of these mountains and things like that. If you watch a video of any sort of flood happening, we on news reporters and things like that, you see the flood roll in. And so you have to imagine Noah, he gets his animals in the ark, he's in the ark and all these things, and he begins to see this water come. He just sees these houses getting destroyed. People might probably hear people screaming, crying, whatever. Um, and we can assume morality and those things. We can assume that he had a compassionate heart, and he probably would have been burdened by this. It'd be saddening to witness these things and know that these people, yes, so even though they did bad, that they were having to live through this, and that they weren't going to have the same gifts and privileges that he was. And so, I think that should motivate us to consider those thoughts and realize that by being silent, if you're not, depending on what's at the end of your sleeve or whatever, um, you are putting yourself in that same situation. So you may be saved, but just consider that, what that'll be like. Now look to Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 12 through 14. And here, speaking of judgment towards Jerusalem, the Lord said, Son of man, when a land sins against me by acting faithlessly, and I stretch out my hand against it, and break its supply of bread, and send famine upon it, and cut off from it man and beast, even if these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they would deliver but their own lives by their righteousness. Here he's just saying that, if a land, that's a country or city, a body of church, doesn't it can be a spiritual body, it can be a country, whatever it's saying. If you act out, whether individually, as a group, etc. Once he says, I'm going to do something, he sent the flood, and that was it. The only person here, Noah, he survived. Everybody else was gone. That time was up. As I said before, these individuals back in the time of Noah, they had secondhand knowledge of God. They had that. That was their parents, their grandparents that literally lived with them. Um, However, they chose to mock him, and not only as individuals, but as a group, and they were punished as such. So the question becomes, how many chances do the Christian church, how many chances is the church as a whole going to get? How many chances are we as individuals going to get? How many chances is a country going to get? If you continue to do these things, he's going to enact that judgment, and it's going to be too late. Now, as put forth in Ezekiel, once God sets out to render his judgment, just as in any court case today, you watch Judge Judy, anything like that, the gavel's down, it's done. That's it, case closed. So, again, with going back to the analogy of the heart on the sleeve, this is what people see. This is what determines what is commonplace. So, when you talk about, faith in schools, things like that, that used to be commonplace. But as people began to retract and as spirituality began to disappear from being commonplace, they took the faith out of the schools. And that's just one example of how that faith works. So, just think, when something is common, it is credible. So it's kind of a goofy example, but Bigfoot isn't common. UFOs aren't common. Things like that. Those aren't common, and as such, sightings and people that say, "Oh, I saw a UFO," they're not seen as credible. They're laughed at, and that's they're good for some entertainment. But other than that, they're not worth much. What's at the end of your sleeve? This is how others will remember and speak of you. So to recap my last video, to kind of tie it together, don't let what's on the end of your sleeve erode your dignity or morality, as this will likewise erode the Christian religion. That's all I got for today. I thank you for being here. Again, if you haven't already, hit that thumbs up if you stuck around to the end. I appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe and follow up and check back for the next video. Thanks.